I guess I'll kick off, should I? I didn't expect there to be so many people in here. I don't know why you're all interested in Toyota, but we'll try and figure that out. A little bit about me, just so you know who I am. I'm now very proud to say I'm the Chief of Agile at Toyota Connected. Toyota Connected is the company, the affiliate company of Toyota that's working on connecting cars to the internet. So there's Internet of Things, connected technologies, telematics data, and lots of other things I'm not allowed to talk to you about, but really cool internet connected cars. For the last 2.5 years before joining Toyota, I was working with Jeff Sutherland. I was a principal trainer and coach at Scrum Inc. and I've been all over the world training and coaching for Jeff Sutherland, and I was very lucky to be asked to come and help coach Toyota Motor North America. So that's the really big building up the road in Plano with about 6,500 people in it. And my colleague Debbie West, who will no doubt talk to you in a little while when we do some questions, she heads up our Agile practice in Toyota, and I was very privileged to be able to work alongside Debbie, helping TMNA, Toyota Motor North America, build their Agile practice. Now I'm heading up the Agile practice and our Agile operations in Toyota Connected, which is a startup company. It's a small company, it's a startup, it started up as an Agile company. I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator, and I always put this in because playing with Lego is really, really cool, and I use Lego in everything I do, and this is one of my product owner classes with all the Lego things in there. And as you'll see, I'm a Doctor Who fan as well, so if there's anybody out there. This is the 5th Doctor. He came to my house, he signed my Dalek, and he signed my TARDIS. So for people who have no idea what that means, that's okay. And this is the office at Toyota Connected. In fact, let's move here. This is the office at Toyota Connected. It's an awesomely cool Agile space. We are looking for people who want to come and join Toyota Connected, so if it's of interest to you. This is the car, the actual Lexus vehicle used in Minority Report with Tom Cruise. So and this is in the office. We have a very, very cool office with this giant video wall, which is our network operations center. So what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit today is a little bit about how Toyota and the Agile world is actually more closely linked than you think they are. A little bit about that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've learned in the last 18 months, a year and a half or so, and what we think seems to work and some of the practices we're doing, and then where we think we're going after that. That's a little bit of what we're going to do, and hopefully there'll be enough time for some questions from both myself and also from Debbie. And there's one or two other Toyota people in the group that may be able to jump in and give their experiences. Just so everybody knows, and everybody knows the history of Toyota, I've got 2 quick slides. Toyota started building weaving looms, and it was the Toyoda, that's the family name, Toyota Loom Works. And this is the thing that made Toyota famous, the first fully automatic weaving loom. This was continuous integration, continuous deployment, and automated testing in 1924. In the mechanical world, before any of us Agile computer people sort of came about. And it was the money from selling this to the Brits that actually paid for Kachira Toyoda, the son of the founder Sakichi Toyoda, to build Toyota's very first car, the Model AA. So a little bit of history there, but there's a lot of what we do vested in Toyota's history. Toyota has 2 major houses. You hear people talk about the house of lean. Toyota has 2 major houses. We have got the Toyota production system. That's what the rest of the world call lean manufacturing. And this is all the lean tools, a lot of the tools I talk about that you're probably very familiar with and use, and words like Kaizen and things of that nature, and just in time or last responsible moment. They're Toyota inventions. And then we've got the Toyota Way, which was published first in 2001, was updated about 2014, which is a lot of the same sort of principles that we have in the Agile Manifesto, in our Scrum world, and generally in our Agile sort of mindset and philosophies. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but this is just to set the scene. This has been around for about 6 decades, so it's been around a lot longer than the Agile world. So here's some of the things that Toyota invented. Kanban, Toyota invention. Not David Anderson, bless him, but Kanban is a Toyota invention. A3 problem solving, the 5 whys, not the 5 whos. Value stream mapping, if you know what value stream mapping is. Set-based design, also known as set-based concurrent engineering. These are some of the techniques that architects and developers may use. Multi-skilled teams, so cross-functional feature teams. That's an actual thing that's used on the Toyota production line. So these are things that have been used by Toyota for decades. Line stop, this is refactoring in place. The line stop called, or what's known as andon, is fixing defects in place, not shipping defects to production. It's a Toyota thing. Small batch production, people who know Don Reinertson, who've done weighted shortest job first, you'll be familiar with what small batches are. Well, sprints are small batch production. Big batch production is 6, 8, 10, 12 month long projects. Small batch production is small iterations, small sprints. Toyota, one piece flow, continuous flow, work in progress of one in every column on your Kanban board. That's a Toyota thing as well. Poka-yoke system, maybe not so well known by a lot of you, but that's mistake proofing. So having things in a standardized way to prevent errors, to improve safety. And then last responsible moment. You'll hear the XP folks talk about last responsible moment. That's just in time. So a few things I wanted to set up there. Another little bit of history. This guy Galileo in 1600 wrote about science and was horribly killed as a result of writing about science. But 20 years later, this guy Sir Francis Bacon, a Brit, wrote the very first book in Latin on the modern scientific process. And it was there that empiricism was born. So everybody who's familiar with Scrum and everybody who's familiar with Ken Schwaber, who I've spent a lot of time with, will know how much Ken is into empirical product development. Empiricism is the root or the foundation of Scrum. So these guys wrote about this, and then some years later, this guy Walter Shewhart taught the world the Shewhart cycle, and he created this thing, specification, production, inspection. But his student, his mentee at the time, Edwards Deming, a lot of you will know Deming, the father of modern quality, learned this from Shewhart and created what he called PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust. He went around Japan in the 50s very famously teaching Japan quality. Then this guy in Toyota, some years later, a guy called Ishikawa-san, he's famous for creating the fishbone diagram, if people know what the fishbone diagram, if it's properly called an Ishikawa diagram. Took the work of Deming and created PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, which became a major feature of the Toyota production system. Let's compare PDCA with what we know about Scrum and the Agile world. So here's Plan, Do, Check, Act, the Toyota repetitive, standardized, repeatable process for doing work in small batches. Here's Scrum on the right-hand side. Sprint planning and refinement, that's our planning. Sprint, our 1 to 4 week sprint, whether you're doing whatever flavor of Agile you're doing, it's going to be fitting in there. That's our doing. Our sprint review and our daily Scrum is our check-in. I'd even say the daily Scrum belongs also in the planning side as well. It's where we inspect and adapt our plan on a daily basis. And then finally, our sprint retrospective. But we started to see the parallels here. The Japanese and Toyota, with Deming's help, created this PDCA cycle decades ago in the 50s. And then Jeff Sutherland came along in '93, created Scrum. Agile Manifesto came in 2001. And you see the parallels, the similarities, a standardized, repeatable process. So when I transitioned from the Toyota world, I used to work for Toyota many years ago before rejoining them recently. When I transitioned, this was pretty obvious to me. I'd learned Scrum from Jeff Sutherland, and I was learning this Agile thing. And I was thinking, well, this is what I've been doing for many years. So then I joined the dots. And this is actually a slide created by Jeff Sutherland. He gave it in a keynote at the Scrum Alliance back in San Diego earlier in the year. So in the 1950s, Taiichi Ono-san creates the Toyota production system. And that's evolved for many, many decades since. This is what we all know as lean manufacturing now, lean product development. Jeff and Ken both cite Toyota heavily in the creation of Scrum and the Scrum Guide, and a lot of the things that they've developed within Scrum as cited as being originating from Toyota. A lot of the things you'll see are influenced by a Toyota. If you look at their own bookshelves, they're full of Toyota books. And in fact, Jeff talked in Toyota last year in Europe. He went over to Europe and spoke in Toyota, and he's also spoken in Toyota in North America as well. Jeff came in when I was still with Scrum Inc. and did some talking at Toyota as well, and he reiterated that a lot of the teachings and principles of Scrum come from Toyota. The Scrum Guide, or Scrum founders, were part of the people who created the Agile Manifesto, and a lot of people seem to think that Scrum came out of Agile. Agile was born out of XP and Scrum. That's where the Agile Manifesto came from. People are already doing Agile for years, but the manifesto was a result of the 17 people who represented XP and the Scrum world. And then, of course, Jeff wrote his book a couple of 3 years ago, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, controversial for some, and that sort of exploded the world. And as a result of that book, a lot more companies are now wanting to get into the world that we inhabit. I was lucky enough to meet these two Japanese gentlemen in Tokyo when we went over to do some teaching in Toyota in Japan, and with Jeff there. This is Professor Nanaka, and that's Professor Takeichi. The name Scrum comes from these gentlemen, not from Jeff Sutherland. Scrum is the formation in the game of rugby from England, but these gentlemen wrote a paper in 1986 and they talked about Scrum project management. It was called the New Product Development Game in the Harvard Business Review. But I thought it was interesting to give you a little bit of the history to sort of set up where we are and where the lineage is between Toyota and Scrum and this agile world that we all inhabit. So, I want to have a bit of fun because I can't lecture you for an hour because you'll all just leave, and nobody's left yet, which is really good. So, let's have a look. Let's have a bit of fun. This thing called inattentional blindness. Has anybody ever heard of this phrase? Inattentional blindness. At least one person. So, if you know what I'm going to do, don't tell anybody else, but just have a bit of fun with them. But this is a real thing. And I really do recommend you look at it. So let's have a bit of fun. There's bits of paper, notepads and scraps on the tables. I didn't bother to distribute post-it notes. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, on each of you, either to make a note mentally on your phones or on a piece of paper, which way is the bus going to move next? Is it going to go left or is it going to go right? Give you 10 seconds, make a note privately on your notepads, on your phones, in your heads, and I'm going to give you an answer in a moment. Which way is the bus going to move next? Yes, sir?
What country is the bus in?
Where are we now? We're in America. So this is let's just assume we're in America for this, yeah? So which way is the bus going to move next? It's not a question thing, but you can ask a question. No, go ahead, please. But you see, I'm only going to give you this much info. See, I'm doing this with Agile people, and Agile people are so clever, and stop it. So, all right, you've all got an answer. Let's move on to the next one. How many countries are there in Africa? I want you to make either a mental note or a physical note. I want a low estimate and a high estimate. How many countries in Africa? A low estimate and a high estimate. Everybody got a couple of numbers down? Okay, one more question for you. How old was Martin Luther King Jr. when he died? A low estimate and a high estimate. Everybody got some answers? Let's see how well you did. There's 54 countries in Africa. For your estimates on Africa, who put 1 as the low estimate and 1,000 as the high estimate? Did anybody do anything like 1 and 100 or 1 and 500? What about Martin Luther King's age when he passed away? Did anybody put 10 and 90? So you all thought you knew more than you really did. That's inattentional blindness. We all think we know more than we really do because the questions were really easy. You could have put 1 for Africa and 1,000 and you would have been right. If you'd done 10 and 100 with MLK, you'd have been right. So what about the bus? You got it right on the nose asking which country it was in, and that's why the lady at the back was asking about the steering wheel. When they ask school kids this, they all get it right. Which side's the door on? So which way is the bus going to move? Left. Because if it goes right, kids are going to die if they get off the bus. But it's really easy. It's like one of those Mensa tests. It's really, really easy. But this is a thing because what we've discovered in Toyota is we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. And whilst when I first went into Toyota as a consultant before I became a team member of Toyota, everybody wanted templates. They wanted a map, exactly how do you, like Voldemort's map, safe. And how do we do an agile transformation? How do we do Scrum? How do we become an agile organization? Please provide me with a map, a template. How are we going to get there? And it's very frustrating to a lot of people when you say, I can't do that. Here's some ideas, some tools, some techniques, some mindsets, some things. And so we realized we need to build a learning organization. Now, Toyota is famous for being a learning organization, for this continuous improvement mentality we call Kaizen. But people still want a nice, easy way to do things. They want a map, they want a roadmap, they want to know exactly what direction they're going to go in, what processes they're going to follow, what tools and techniques they're going to use. So we decided we needed to build a learning organization. Peter Senge, who wrote The Fifth Discipline, it's a superb book to read, talks all about how to build a learning organization, some of the aspects there. But the key thing for me is that we needed to build a learning organization. We needed to learn, we needed to try things out. And that's what Agile is, and that's what PDCA is. We need to do small experiments. So let's look at what we've learned so far. I love this next picture. There is no one size fits all. So whether you're doing less, and Craig Larman's a great mentor and friend to me, and I have a great deal of respect for Craig. He's a brilliant computer scientist, and I like a lot of the aspects of less. I think it's a fantastic framework for scaling. Nexus as well. I tell Ken it's just the same as less, but he argues with me. But Nexus is good, and actually I have three teams in Toyota Connected have asked me if they can try doing Nexus integration, creating a Nexus integration team, and the answer is yes. Please go try that experiment, see how it works for you. There's no right or wrong answer. Jeff's approach to scaling is very much one of the things that we've adopted and adapted in Toyota, which is to take a fractal approach, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then there's this small, simple process here that we. I'm not the biggest fan, but there's elements of this that do make sense. But again, with anything like this, you need to take the pieces that work for you and not try and apply this as a prescription to solve all your problems. This is something that we've learned. One of the other things we've learned a lot about is complexity. So Scrum was designed to work here. Now, if people aren't familiar with this, this is the Cynefin framework. I know it's this weird word, Cynefin, but it's actually a Welsh word that means domain. And David Snowden is the guy who came up with the Cynefin model. A lot of people may know him or may have heard of him. And I'm not going to go into great detail on this, other than to say that Scrum was designed to work in this complex domain. The complex domain is where we don't understand the causes and effects of everything. We know there's things that we're going to discover, and this is where Scrum and Agile fits in. We don't know what we know until we know it. So we can't prescribe that. We can't give a plan for that, and a lot of us work in very complex environments. So we've spent a lot of time understanding complexity and the difference between complex, complicated, and simple domains. Chaos is when the political system's failed and everything has gone horribly wrong. So this is something I'd encourage everybody to look at, is David Snowden's work on the Cynefin framework. Some of you may know the Stacy diagram, nothing to do with Stacey Louis, but the Stacy diagram, which is another way of representing complexity. So this is something we've spent a lot of time studying because we didn't know enough about it. If you're a military person, the OODA Loop will be familiar to you. This is John Boyd's OODA Loop. He was a military flying ace. He wrote about his experience as a military ace and how he survived. He was the most successful fighter pilot in US military aviation history. He was known as 42nd Boyd because he could have an enemy aircraft come behind him. Within 40 seconds, he'd be behind them and shoot them out the sky. It was that good. And he credits it to his OODA Loop, which looks very much like PDCA or a standardized repeatable process here. Look at the most common word that's used, feedback. This is the thing we espouse and teach all the time in our Agile practices. But some of the military words that we've learned and some of the things we're starting to understand is situational awareness. Being aware of all the things around us. Product owners, this is a skill for you, situational awareness. Then closed loop communication. If you've been on, if anybody who's done flying lessons here or been a pilot or is a pilot, but you're sitting in these two sticks in the cockpit, and you've got your captain and your co-pilot, or the two pilots in there, and they'll always go, I have control, and they'll hand off control to each other, so that avoids bad things happening. That's closed loop communication. How many times are you repeating messages back to yourselves and your team? So when the team says we need to do something, then they need to repeat that instruction back. And we did an experiment down in Kentucky in our manufacturing plant there a few weeks ago, and we've been in this session for about 10 minutes with only about 6 people. It's a product owner session, a portfolio session actually with the product owners. And after about 10 minutes, my colleague, as an ex-military aviator, stopped them and said, can somebody tell me why we're here? Because we'd actually said why we were here at the beginning of the session. Nobody could repeat that back. So that's where we start to get into this closed loop communication, so people actually understand why we're doing what we're doing. This is some of the things we've learned. Scaling a broken system doesn't work. If you've got a little mess and you scale it, what do you get? So why would you go into an organization and start doing scaled Agile or scaled Scrum straight away without fixing the things that need to be fixed first? So this is something we learned. Something that's very dear to Debbie's heart here. Don't boot teams randomly. So the first thing you do as a training company, when I have my scrumming hat on, is we go in and train hundreds of people, because there's lots of money in training. We can go into companies, and there's people in here who are trainers and coaches, and they know exactly what I'm saying. We can go in there and we can sell you. And we trained over 1,000 people by the time we'd done in the last 12 months. And we're still training people. So this is what happens. We've got this whole value stream here, and we go and do Scrum here. And what happens? We've got a sub-optimization. If you were Deming advocates, you've got this system here, and we've sub-optimized it, because now this team's awesome, but everybody else is still doing what they were doing before. And so we've got to optimize the system. And this is what Deming taught us. We have to optimize the system. So we recognize that booting ad hoc and random teams, even though they've been trained, they were chomping at the bit to get going, if we started booting them up, actually they weren't in control of the whole thing soup to nuts. They're in control of a piece of the whole puzzle. And if we booted those up, it actually caused a sub-optimization in the system. So we needed to boot the whole system, and I'll get to that shortly. Conway's Law, Melvin Conway, I don't know if people are familiar with this. Conway says any organization that designs a system will inevitably produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. Basically, you build products and services and systems that look like your org chart. So what we've discovered is that deep hierarchies actually slow us down and kill our efficiency. So in Toyota Connected, we have a very shallow, there's only 3 levels. And really they're almost 2 levels. And we have this philosophy of manage work, not people. We don't want people telling people what to do. We want people managing work. So we really do want very flat hierarchy, really team of teams. We want self-organizing, self-managing people guiding the work, managing the work. We don't have middle management telling other people what to do. We don't find a value in that. We don't actually need that. We actually find ways to repurpose that knowledge with those middle management into actually producing value. And this is a hard sell in an organization that's got a very, very deep hierarchy. The other thing, people over process. Talked to a lot of people earlier today. It is all about the people. Toyota is a fantastic process company. They're probably one of the best companies in the world at process, but they're also very heavily focused and invested in people. And what we discovered is, like the Agile Manifesto says, to change culture, we first must change behavior. We must focus on the people. So no matter how good we are at doing Scrum, there's lots of people who can do Scrum really well, but don't actually get any better and don't actually improve and are still miserable. There's miserable Scrum teams out there. But if you can get people really motivated, very happy, teach them how to do teaming and work together, and actually change the environment in which those people are working, we'll actually be able to produce and actually achieve a lot more, even if we don't do great Scrum or great Agile practices. Hopefully we'll do those, because with the good coaching and teaching and self-learning, we'll get there. But we really did we have really come to the realization we have to focus on the people. And that's people at all levels, the executive level all the way down, not just the teams, and not ignoring those middle managers I mentioned a moment ago. So that's a little bit about what we found. So let's talk about how we're doing it and some of the things we're doing now. Some of this is Nigel's philosophy. Some of this is what we're actually doing, and some of it's what we're espousing to do, we're hoping to do, and we're actually on that journey to get there. So, the Toyota way. I'm not going to read all this out. You will get a copy of the slides later on. But essentially, the Toyota way is 14 key principles. Just like the manifesto, the Agile Manifesto is its 4 values and 12 principles. Toyota has 4 principles, 4 key P's they call them, which is just basically philosophy, process, people, and problem solving. And there's 12 principles in there. If you're reading them on the screen, you'll see that a lot of those principles are very similar to the things you've learned in the Agile world. A lot of the things, there might be some Japanese words that don't make immediate sense, but you know, relentless reflection, we call this Hansai. That's retrospective. Well, the Japanese have been doing this for centuries, and Toyota's been doing it for decades. So a lot of these things are common themes. So we really are focused on teaching the Toyota way of doing things within Toyota with Agile teams, teaching Agile teams and Scrum teams the Toyota way principles and the history and the reasons why these exist. We have Scrum at the core. I mean, not just because I work for Jeff, not because I know Jeff and Ken very well, but if you look at any of the scaling frameworks, they all have Scrum at the core. So we have Scrum at the core of everything we do as our basic framework. Scrum is a framework, not a methodology. And I consider Scrum a behavioral framework. It's a standardized, repeatable process for getting people into a rhythm to do things. So this is where we've got Scrum at the core. And look at this, we're doing 1-week sprints. So the majority of teams, we have some teams doing 2-week sprints, the majority of teams are doing 1-week sprints. We call them sprints, not iterations, because hey, we do Scrum. And we want value at the end of everything, not an increment. We actually want real value shipped at the end of every sprint. People think this is madness. We've discovered by doing 1-week sprints, we're getting 52 times a year the opportunity to improve, because the outcome of our retrospective is an improvement, is a Kaizen. We want some type of improvement we'll implement in the very next sprint. So short sprints are giving us the opportunity to talk to our customer every week, to involve our customers in our sprint reviews every week and get that rapid feedback. We're reducing the batch size as small as we can, because if we have big batch size, then bigger errors, more defects, more rework, more problems to solve, where that short window is giving us a very short batch. So we're only going to make a mess for a week, and then we can fix that. Or shall we make a mess for a month and then fix that? So it's a little bit, and this comes a lot from Don Reinertson's teaching as well. People who know Don Reinertson, lean product development, ex-submarine nuclear reactor guy, very clever guy. So small batch production. We're doing fractal scaling. So basically a fractal, if we create a fractal, we create a copy of something we know that is good. So we're making sure we're getting the system working well first, getting the people working well, fixing the problems with the system before we try and scale it. That's one of the key philosophies that we've got. Is it working perfectly? No. Are we moving towards that? Yes. That's what we all aspire to. We don't want to take a broken system, teach them Scrum, and then go, off you go, because it's just going to be horrible. One team we can fix, 5, 10 teams in a large program. We've got some programs that are, you know, a lot of people, over 100 people. You have a question?
Is it working perfectly? No. So what is perfect?
Oh, what I mean is that, are we fixing the system perfectly before we start doing Scrum? The answer was no. But that's what we're trying to fix, all the system, get the system fixed right. And my advice and our learning is that if we try and take a system that's suboptimal and got a lot of problems with it, and then try and just throw Scrum at it and then scale it with whatever framework or approach you want to do, all you're going to do is that little mess is going to become a real big mess, because now you've got all the learning curve of the new way of doing things, all the extra coaching that has to go in, and you're trying to get people to deliver value at the end of every sprint, but 3/4 of the people doing the work actually aren't on the team. So we've still got matrix management, we've still got the legal folks that take 3 weeks to respond, that type of thing. So we're trying to fix that, but we can't always get a lawyer on every team, that type of thing to begin with. We do small experiments. I mentioned I've got 3 teams that want to try a little bit of Nexus. They want to try the Nexus integration team. We've taught them Scrum of Scrums. They're using Meta Scrum for the product owners to coordinate. They're using Scrum of Scrums for the teams to coordinate as a virtual integration team. But they wanted something a little bit more formal. And they came and said to me, hey Nigel, we'd like to try Nexus, and we'd like to try set up a Nexus integration team across these 3 teams because we think that'll help us integrate better at the end of every sprint. And they said they're doing 2-week sprints, and I said, okay, go try it out, have a play. Be true to the core Scrum values, still do good Scrum, great product ownership, amazing refinement, and all the other things we do in Scrum. But if you want to try that out to help you scale, then please try it out. Small experiment, try it for a week or 2, see what happens. If it doesn't work, tweak it. This is the beauty of doing short iterations because you can tweak things very rapidly. So we do small experiments. And we think failure is a good thing. Fail fast, learn early, as Tom Chi said, founder of Google X, maximize the rate of learning by minimizing the time to try things. So if you spend a whole month-long sprint, you're not minimizing the time to try things because a month's a long period of time. So the shorter time you can try things, the small experiments. I put this book up here. It's called The Happiest Company to Work For. This is a Japanese company called the Mirai Corporation, like the Toyota Mirai car. Mirai Corporation, they actually pay every employee the equivalent of $6 for every mistake they make. Because they want to foster a culture, a behavior of actually being honest about mistakes and actually then having to deal with those mistakes. You're not supposed to make them more than once. It's not a way to get rich. But it's a book I recommend. It's a great book to read. I recommend Norman Bodek, for people who know Productivity Press. Norman Bodek was the guy who got that translated. It's a fantastic book to read. We're trying to instill Agile architecture. Things called contract-first design and loosely coupled architecture. Some of the techies in the room will say, well, that's microservices now. It was service-oriented architecture or enterprise service bus in the world's gone by. But contract-first design is basically, if you're doing something that's hardware, Scrum in hardware is a big thing. This picture comes from my ex-colleague Joe Justice, for people who know Joe Justice, who does Scrum in hardware. Basically, we're saying, let's define up front the interface between these major components. We'll do that first. Now we can iterate the other components independently. So we're trying to get architects to think about, technical architects, enterprise architects, solution architects, to think about how to do this in their world so that we're not having to have 3 months worth of sprints building the Taj Mahal of architecture, which is one of the things we run into continuously. So contract first design, loosely coupled architecture. This is one of the philosophies we're trying to teach and trying to get, and we're having some success. This is getting better. This is another thing that Toyota invented. It's called set-based design or set-based concurrent engineering. This is where you try multiple things out at the same time. You've got design, development, and testing all happening concurrently on multiple different options. Because what you're actually doing is it's actually eliminating the waste by delaying decisions until later. Rather than spending 6 months saying, this is the solution design we're going to go with, let's build this out, and then in 6 months go, oops, and now we've got to start reworking all that. So we do multiple things at once. This was how they built the Toyota Prius. The Prius went from concept to cash in 15 months. A brand new revolutionary vehicle as it was when they started working in 93, delivered it in 95. So this was the technique they used on the Prius to deliver it, because the average model launch in Toyota and most auto manufacturers is about 4 years from concept to delivery to the customer. So this is something I'd recommend you have a look at. Now, who knows John Cotter, Leading Change, very famous guy. He's probably one of the preeminent, he's considered the management guru currently in the world. He talks about the dual operating system, and something that Debbie and I and the team have been working on is eliminating the hierarchy. I talked about this with Conway's Law earlier, the hierarchy telling everybody what to do and everybody having to report up and down the line. It takes you 3 months to get a decision on something because everybody has to have skin in the game. So what Kotter talks about is actually separating this, and we're going to create a network of teams. And I was hearing one of the keynotes talk about tribes, and teams of teams, very much the Spotify way of doing things. And so what we're building are small teams that we can fractally scale, and then setting up the communication mechanisms between the teams, Scrum of Scrums, and that type of communication mechanism, so that we can have this as an autonomous body without hierarchy. The hierarchy remains, but is slimmed down to keep things, like human resources, because they still call them coal and gas rather than people, and doing things like planning and budgeting and defining jobs and things sits in the hierarchy, but we want the knowledge work and the cool stuff that we work on, whether it's in IT or other agile pursuits, happening within the network. And this is a dual operating system. So this is something I'd recommend you look at very carefully. Very, very good books. Anything by Kotter is good. Back to that booting random teams. Value streams. A value stream is all the pieces needed to deliver the value to the customer. So it's not just the designers and the coders and the testers, but it's the sales and marketing folks, the legal folks, the procurement people, the vendor management people, all those different types of roles that might be necessary in your business to get value delivered. So we're actually booting value streams. Rather than actually booting this team up here or this team up here, we're going to look at delivering the entire value stream, getting all the people involved in delivering the soup to the nuts. We want to go whole concept to cash all the way through. So we take a whole group of people and we launch them as a value stream, not as individual teams. And that helps us to start to fix the system. And the tool and technique we use to do that is value stream mapping. Another Toyota invention. This was known as materials and information flow diagramming. It was created in Japan, and it was basically used to help us streamline our supply chain because of our just-in-time type of manufacturing. We can't have different variation in the flow in our supply chain. But this is something that I highly recommend you read. This book is the only real book I'd recommend you read. It's written by Mike Rother and a guy called John Shook. John Shook was the chairman just until a few weeks ago of the Lean Institute. He was also the most senior person in America at one point in the joint venture in California called NUMMI, which is now the Tesla factory in Fremont, California. So I'd recommend that. But value stream mapping is about understanding the entire process to get your value to market. This book will teach you how to do it, and you can find webinars online also to teach you, but I highly recommend studying this. Once we understand the value stream, once we understand the people we need to boot, then we create a network of teams. Small, fractal teams, and this horizontal cross-functional team I will mention in a moment because that's a useful concept that we learned in Toyota, and actually my colleague at the back of the room, Abdul, was the Scrum coach who actually helped implement that in Toyota. But essentially, once we've identified the value stream, we understand all the steps to get the value to the customer, we take all the people involved in that and we launch them as a value stream, as a complete group. That's the correct concept. Yes, sir?
Sorry, could you please go back to the previous slide?
This one here.
I don't understand it. It says start here, but then the only line the arrow points toward it, not away from it.
Oh yeah, okay. So the madness in this, my madness, but the madness here is, here we go. My madness is here. What we want to do is to start with the finished value, okay? And then what was the process preceding that? What was the last thing we did before we shipped the value? So the process does flow that way, but this is the last thing we did. The reason we work backwards, there's an FBI technique which they use with criminals, which is you can't tell a lie backwards. So they get you to tell the story backwards. And this is called, in value stream mapping, it's called linear contextualization. So when you actually work the value stream backwards, you have to really focus and really understand how we got to where we were. So you start to eliminate all that extraneous things that you did. Because if you start at this end and work towards it, you just write down everything you do. whether or not you need to do it, you just write it all down. But if you work in reverse, this linear contextualize, that allows you to contextualize it in a linear fashion by moving backwards. You actually enable yourself to eliminate wasteful processes and wasteful functions by mapping it that way. So you actually save yourself some time. And this is what this book will teach you how to do. Because if you look at the current condition and then map your ideal condition, you actually miss things. So if you work backwards, you actually start to understand that a little better. So, network of teams we want to launch. Here was a piece of radical stuff that we did. We got all the executives together and we said, we're going to fund people, not projects. Projects have a life, they start, they end. But actually products don't. That's why we call them products in this world, not projects, because products exist until they eventually go end of life. And so we want to fund people and fund teams, not projects. So we create a business area with a capital of people. So we have a pool of people, a pool of capacity in a specific business area. And then we ask the people who own the dollars to fund. How much are you willing to fund for the next 12 months for this business area? How much are you willing to fund? And then we provide the funding into that business area. Then, however you do portfolio management, whatever way you do that, we use different meta-scrum processes in Toyota, but however you decide on what things you're going to work on in this business area in the next weeks, months, year, whatever, we then release to this pool of capacity, which are arranged as this small group of a network of teams in this sort of tribal fashion, and then the value is released, it's controlled by a chief product owner, and then this work flows from idea to what we call start of production or concept to cash. But this was a hugely controversial and radical thing, and we're getting some traction there, and the head of finance, the chief financial officer for the IS division, is working very hard to change the way we fund people, rather than this miserable annual planning process where people work for weeks to come up with giant portfolios and justify their existence and justify why they have any money and basically pretend what value is going to be delivered. We want to actually do empirical product development, so we want to fund people. So, safe folks might call this the release train. It's the same sort of idea. We want to fund a train of people in a business area and flow work to them to produce value. Product ownership, one per team. So we don't subscribe to Craig or Ken's view, or I don't, of Ken's and Craig's view, and I know them very well, of one product owner servicing multiple teams. We found in practice that, delegating the responsibilities, this is the one line in the Scrum Guide I hate, which is where the product owner can delegate all their responsibilities. They remain accountable, but you can delegate all your responsibilities to the team. Well, the team really aren't product owners. The team aren't really skilled product management people. And this, we've not really found this works really, really well, And some safe implementations, some less or Nexus implementations may get it working well. I'm not saying it doesn't work well. In the main, what we found is we need a dedicated, focused, committed product owner who's accountable for that product. We want them spending all their time. It's a full-time job. Half the time with the customer, the people who care, stakeholders, wherever that request is coming from, half the time with the team. We want them attending all the key Scrum events, especially planning, refinement, the review, the retrospective, and if they want to turn up as a silent participant in the daily Scrum, that would be awesome, because they may have some help they can give the team. These are some of the characteristics. I won't read them all out, apart from the one that says empowered. We have had to work hard to make sure product owners are truly empowered, but not just giving them the executives saying you're empowered, you can make decisions, but trying also to get the product owners to understand what being empowered really means, because for years they've been told what to do. So what do you mean nobody's going to tell me what to do? So we have to help them try and understand what it means to be truly empowered. Scrum Masters, same thing, one per team. I am of the view, I share Craig's view to a little bit, Craig Larman's view, that if we get teams that are hyper productive, really running, and they just do Scrum and do really great Agile, and they don't need somebody to facilitate them, then I am of the view that one Scrum Master could potentially Scrum Master across two teams. But our starting out position is one per team. I'm not going to read this out, it's just one of my visuals I use. Scrum Masters are Scrum coaches. I take the Spotify view that each team should have a real coach, not just somebody who says it's time to stand up, although the Scrum Guide says nothing about standing up, just so you know. So, it doesn't. Teams are co-located wherever possible. If they're in India, then co-locate them in India. So in Toyota Connected, we have 3 teams in India. They are co-located in India. All the people on the team are in India. And the same in the US, we've got teams that are all co-located. We're trying to get everybody, the teams, to sit together and be co-located. It's not so easy in Toyota Motor North America because we've got the teams are spread around the organization. But this is one of the things we aspire to. We can't co-locate them physically. We want to use all our technology aids to co-locate them electronically. This is Taiichi Ohno, the guy who created the Toyota production system. This is his book on this. We believe small teams are the way to go. I was listening to Ahmed this morning when he was talking about, they have these teams that are 25, 30 people. There's a lot of research that says that's not such a cool thing. But what he did say when he talked about that was actually they're really small pods, and those pods form a bigger team, which would probably be, like the other speaker was saying, like a tribe. So, but small teams do work better than very large teams. Team spaces, this is just the Japanese word for a what's known as a big room, the obeya. It was a concept that came out of Toyota, this whole idea of a dedicated space where the team do all the work. This is somebody else's graphic, so I didn't put the words around it. But essentially in Toyota Connected now, a lot of the office space that's been created has been created for teams. So each team now has a dedicated team space where they can work together, live together, play together. Let you take pictures of it before I move it on. Go on, I'm going to be kind to you. Analog and digital tools. So we've got these things everywhere because Microsoft's a small partner in Toyota Connected, so we've got all these Surface hubs everywhere. But we have a lot of analog tools as well. I am not really a tools fan. I like post-it notes and whiteboards and pens, but we have teams, if they are distributed, we need to be able to share. These things are great for doing interactive whiteboard sessions on. And we have cool things like this. We have real 3D simulators, multiple axis simulators that they can jump in and test code in real time and actually drive the car and test the code they've been building for the car. So that's quite a cool thing we've got. I want to talk about this just briefly because one of the problems we faced in Toyota is that we got all these verticals, all these vertical business units. And in Toyota IS, there's 3,000 people, 4,500 people in Toyota IS. 4,500 people. And so they've got these horizontal teams, people who do servers and networking and telecoms and things of that nature. I don't know if my colleague Abdul's still around, but I think he probably ran off. He got fed up listening to me. But basically, this is actually some photographs. What we actually did, we built a cross-functional feature team in a horizontal area. So people are going to build servers, do networking, do firewall configurations, do all that type of thing. We put them together and we took an 11-week server build, a build that was typically an SLA of 11 weeks and got it done in under 11 hours by doing this. So this is what a cross-functional horizontal team was. I'm sad Abdul's not there because he was the guy who coached this. And this is something now we've proven that works fractally. Proven that works at small scale. Now we can scale it fractally by copying this and creating multiple instances of this. So each of these big vertical business units now can have one or more cross-functional horizontal teams. So we haven't got this gigantic pipe feeding into one small bottleneck for all the horizontal type services. So if you've got this problem in the business, this is one countermeasure, one way to potentially solve for this. I've just told them all about you, Abdul, and you left the room. But he was the man who did it. He was the guy who made this happen. One of the other things that's happened, and this is a great testament to Debbie over to my right, fully engaged executives. I left this almost to the end because it really, and we've only got 2 slides, so it really got us to the point where we got all the executives, the CIO for the whole of North America and my CEO in Toyota Connected, and all these executive leadership team. They initially went through 4 days of training. We made them do the Scrum Master and Product Owner training back to back, very interactive, a lot of gameplay, a lot of fun. and we've kept them fully engaged. The key executives meet almost every day, 3-4 times a week, in what we call an executive action team. So they meet every day for 15 minutes. They have a backlog in Jira. They're actually executing the backlog because we have an awesome product owner for the executive action team here. And we also have a Scrum Master for the executive action team. Where's Tommy? Oh, he's not in the room, but he is in the building. Gentleman by the name of Tommy Walker. And they scrum the executives, the executive scrum. And then they've committed, at least for every Thursday afternoon, I think it's every Thursday afternoon, the executives get together to actually work on the transformational backlog. So we're talking VPs and EVPs and C-suite level people here doing Scrum. And this was one of the things when I came in originally as a consultant to Toyota, we had to get this right. We had to get this amount of engagement at this level, because when we wanted to change things, as those impediments boil up in the team level and the scrum of scrums and whatever other levels you go to, we needed to go somewhere, because if we needed money or to change facilities or to change the way we do work, these are the people who can do it. And this is one of the many workshops that these executives attend, and you can see the amount of post-it notes there, and a lot of those post-it notes actually come from the teams telling them these are the things we need to do. DevOps, the latest thing, it's the greatest snake oil at the moment. So we are heavily invested in automated testing, in continuous integration to continuous deployment. It's early days, especially on the TM&A side. There's a long journey there, but there's a lot of people that are dedicated and invested into this. In Toyota Connected, they're a little bit further on because it's a smaller group of people. But we're working with our customers, so the DevOps people are working with their customers, which are the teams who are using the tools, to determine which tools the teams want to use. So the teams are the customers of the DevOps world. So we want to give them all the automated testing tools, the teams to do continuous integration and deployment, so they can ship continuously, not just at the sprint boundary, but they can ship any time at any hour in the sprints. They can really truly do extreme programming. So this is something we're investing heavily in. We're trying to eliminate all manual testing in any form. And just almost there, promise you, we also do fun. This is you don't get this in TM&A. We have fridges in Toyota Connected fully stocked with beer. We have PlayStations, we have chill out zones. We don't have like slides like Google do because we're all on one floor. We do unlimited paid vacation. Who wants to come work now at Toyota Connected? We have a fantastic team. We have fantastic people. We have some of the best brains in the industry. Our management is almost zero hierarchy. It's hands-off. It's self-guided. It's self-organizing. It's self-managing. There's people like me and my colleagues who help coach these fantastic people. This was just the other week. Every week they're doing daft things. Every week. Lena's in the team and she's in the team. Every week they're doing stupid things. Oh, you're in the picture. I didn't know you were in the picture. You're in the clown lot over here. Oh, okay, so she's over there. And these babies were really scary, yeah? This was Movember, which I knew nothing about before this week. And the ladies from HR dressed in all these moustaches and won a prize and stuff. And Toyota Connected was just voted one of the top 100 places to work, and it came number 20 as a company. So we're in the top 20 of companies of places to work in Texas, which I think is a pretty cool thing. And as I say, we have beer. So, beer, unlimited paid vacation and beer, and PlayStations and fun. And I'm going to leave the last word to the founder of the company. This is Sakichi Toyoda. He's the reason that Toyota exists. Before you say you can't do something, try it. We've got 8 minutes, 7 minutes or 8 minutes for questions and answers, but that's all the waffle I've got for you. I hope some of that was useful and valuable. I hope it's given you a little bit of an insight. It wasn't as interactive as I'd liked it to have been, but I wanted to give you a flavour for what we as a global corporation are learning and what we're finding works, and we'll continue to learn. And some of the stuff we're doing now we'll probably stop doing, and we'll try some other things out. But, there's some Toyota people in the room. Is Abdul? Please come to the front of the room, Abdul. Debbie's with me. And guys, fire away with questions. And who else is there? And Arnie, come to the front. Come to the front, Arnie.